Welcome to the Redefining Strength podcast. Everything you need to succeed on your health and fitness journey, even the stuff you don't want to hear. Creating a routine you love means meeting yourself where you're at. Yet so often when we want to achieve a goal, what do? We look for a perfect plan. We try and force a round peg into a square hole, or maybe it's a square peg into a round hole, but we're trying to push something in and create something that really doesn't fit what we need and even need now. And I'm super excited to dive in with Michelle to really talk about creating that sustainable routine and what that really means. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about how we often approach making changes to reach our goals. We look for a perfect plan, but this is also what sabotages our ultimate success.
Yes, you can't just grind your way to success. And so often we look at someone where they're at right now and we're like, oh, we want to be like them. And you start to see what they're doing and we try to go all in and do everything they're doing all at once, when most likely they probably started small and built their routine and it's theirs. Your routine is going to look different than everyone else's. My routine's different than your routine. We have to have our own routine that really is serving us, and we're not just kind of a slave to following things and checking things off of the box just because we think that's ideal.
And it's an interesting thing because you have to use other people to get an idea of a roadmap. You have to look for plans to help guide you. But it's remembering that there's so much nuance to everything. It's like when you do set your roadmap out, right? You set your GPS to get to your destination. While you have that route that a lot of people might have driven, it is slightly different because your house isn't their house, right? Maybe someone lived in your house before, but at the same time, they're starting from a slightly different position, even if it's your next door neighbor. And then there's different things that can come up. You might have to go pee at a different time than they did. You might have to stop for food at a different time. You might run into traffic jams, right? So while we can know that there is a roadmap forward and a way to guide ourselves, the exact implementation of our journey, the exact journey is going to be very unique no matter what.
Yeah, and I know we always say this here, but it truly is also that 1% improvement. Don't even look at this as like, oh, I'm going to completely do a complete overhaul of my routine. Make it so simple that it seems like almost silly to start there. Start there and then slowly build as you truly create this habit and your routine that fits you.
I love that way of putting it. Build the routine that fits you. Because I think too, when we think about a plan, we think about going on a program, not building that program around ourselves. And that's what ultimately keeps us very stuck, is that we're trying to force ourselves into that mold. And it doesn't work that way. Like, balance is an act, right? It's not just one set it and forget it thing.
Yeah, the best routine, the best plan that you're ever going to follow is one that's truly going to fit you, because that's going to be the one that you stick with. You know, you always hear like, "Oh, I did that for like a couple of weeks," or "I did that workout program for this long," but you didn't stick with it because it truly wasn't meeting you where you were at.
And that's even an interesting thing because, yeah, you did it for that long. Okay, but what's next? I think we have this idea that I'm doing this is forever. And it's like, no, it's still the plan right now, right? It's the right turn on this street, not the left turn on the next one. And the more you embrace, I'm doing this, okay, what's the exit strategy or what's the next phase, the better off you're going to be, because there will be phases and evolutions. In building that forever process, that sustainable lifestyle, it doesn't mean doing one thing. It means coming back to the meeting yourself where you're at right now. So you do this one thing that meets yourself where you're at. Okay, as you progress, now where are you at? You need that reassessment to keep moving forward. So out of this, how do we go about setting an accurate sort of location for ourselves to know how we can meet ourselves where we're at to move forward?
Yeah, you have to first start with knowing your why. What is your end goal? What is it that you actually want to build towards? Because if you're just pulling out a routine because it's like, oh, well, this sounds like a good habit to start, but you don't see what you're building towards or how it's even like contributing to you to get to that end goal, then there's no reason for you to stick to it. And so it makes it harder to continue that. So really looking at like what it is you're actually looking for. Why are you even wanting your routine? Is it because you feel like you need a little bit better time management, more energy, more confidence? You're trying to improve your overall performance? What areas are you actually looking to improve and then build towards that?
I think that's a key point too. It's not just your ultimate goal, but the areas in your lifestyle, in your mindset that you're looking to improve. Because so often we do just put things together that look cool or fun or hard or feel like we're doing more work or someone else said worked. And we don't assess, well, that worked for them. But is the purpose right for my purpose? Does this drive me towards creating something that does build in a sustainable way? Does it meet me where I'm at? We don't ask those other questions to really assess that balance because it isn't just our ultimate goal. It is what else do we want out of our lifestyle? Because in order to reach our goal, we're kind of building a new identity and therefore new routines, new habits, new lifestyle patterns, right?
Yeah, just overloading yourself with like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that," because I mean, and I'm sure, like, they can all be good. Like, it can all be like, "Oh, I'm gonna start working out, and I'm gonna eat this every morning, and every morning I'm waking up at 5." Those are all, can be good things, but does it actually serve you?
And does it serve the direction you ultimately want to head? And I say that too because I think a lot of times we assess what might even be, you know, make us happy in the moment, not what will really drive us forward because there will be some sacrifices as we're really trying to create something sustainable with that long-term vision. But also off of that, it's so easy to get caught up in when we're thinking about our why, the value of it, and putting the a little guilt trip on ourselves even of, "Oh, well, it's just 5 pounds. That's why it's not that important. That's why I don't stick with these things." So connecting it to a deeper meaning is really key if we do wanna find the true purpose to be able to outline those other changes that we need and value those other changes to some extent.
Yeah, it's so easy, like, when things are gonna get hard, you're gonna wake up in the morning and be like, "Oh, I don't wanna do that." But if you have a deeper reason behind just like, "Oh, like, you're gonna do this because, it sounds good," and it even makes you sound good when you're telling people what your routine is. But if that's the only reason you're doing it and it's not truly because you have something more deep rooted that makes it harder to rationalize, the 5 pounds or rationalize, "Oh, like, it's a busy day today. I just don't have time. I can't prioritize it." That is going to help you stick with it if you can focus more on the process than just the outcome.
Yeah, it is that effort we're putting in daily and the build of creating a better us, the us we feel we deserve. And I mention this too because I do think, and I've seen it even on posts that I've had of I wanted an aesthetic goal, or we have clients coming in who want weight loss goals, and people will be like, it's more important, the beauty on the inside and all these different things. And while I agree, we want to like not just focus on one aspect of our life because that doesn't make us a whole person, that's devaluing what can get us motivated to make a change. And it's also devaluing the habit changes that go into some of these goals, which can pay off in so many ways. And it makes us feel guilty or selfish or vain for pursuing them. And we shouldn't, because they will be pushing us outside our comfort zone to achieve things we never thought possible and build the lifestyle that drives us forward in so many other ways. So I only bring this up because a lot of times we think, well, my goal isn't that deep rooted in my why, and therefore maybe I don't value it enough to move forward. And I think with those cases, a lot of times we just haven't looked at all of the ramifications of all the habits that we're going to put in that we might come for one reason but stay for another.
I love that. Yes, because I think that's huge. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with having an aesthetic goal. There's there's not. If that's your why, that's not a bad why to have. But there's, as you said, there's usually that even often opens up doors to other other reasons that maybe you didn't even connect with why that was so important to you. So I think there's always ways to kind of go a little bit deeper there as well.
And I know we've talked a lot about, finding your whys, meeting yourself where you're at. But what is so key in this is also creating a plan off of this that is like flexible to be sustainable. So, in that, when you're meeting yourself where you're at, what kind of things do we have to assess with, okay, I have my value, I have my why, now what?
Yeah, you have to take into consideration what stage of life you currently are in. And I say this because, If you're a young mom, if you're a mom with older kids, if you're a mom, an empty nester, or if you just never had kids and you have other obligations with work, if you have different things going on with work and you're at different stages in your career, these are all things that play into effect of what your routine is. You know, we kind of at least I feel like oftentimes people put on a pedestal like the morning routine. Well, you want to start your day off great. And I do think there's always a routine that you should have in your morning, but everyone always kind of accumulate like pulls workouts into that. Like you should start your day with your workout. That doesn't work for everyone. Some of us are at a stage of life where we need to, you know, prioritize sleep. And maybe that workout needs to happen in the evening or later in the day. And that's completely fine. That's where it's kind of like assessing what is really going to help you build your day around your work, around your obligations, around any of those things that you also highly prioritize now. We value things differently in different stages. And that's normal. That's being human. We are always going to change things. And your routine is probably going to change in 5 years from now. It's just how it is because we're constantly evolving. Your routine cannot stay stagnant because you're not staying in the same moment.
And off of that, I would urge you to even think about what have been your common excuses for why you can't get started or in a groove right now. Because a lot of times those excuses pop up from our priorities. What in our priorities might have shifted? Because if those weren't excuses prior, what habits and routines are you trying to force based on a different season of life? And thinking about this too, like when we think about sustainable, it's what was comfortable. It is what is comfortable. So if you think about what was sustainable potentially in college or as a new mom versus now as an empty nester, they could be very different things. And if you don't accept that change is going to have to occur, that's where we see ourselves not owning our priorities and those excuses popping up even more.
Yeah, and I think what you're even touching on is huge because like I said, I feel like we always think of routine as, "Oh, that's just morning." Or we kind of talk about people who have their routines as being boring. No, these people just have non-negotiables that they have set for themselves, and that's what's important for you to be able to kind of continue with that consistency in your life.
That's so important, the non-negotiables, and I was even just thinking now about a more recent change in my schedule where I loved working out sort of like mid-morning, a few years ago, and that just became unsustainable for me, so I shifted it more to morning. I like getting it done. But this past year, I realized that really just didn't work for my schedule anymore, and so I've had to go to the evening. When I first started that, I very much disliked it. I still can't tell you that I like it anymore. And I would have told you at the beginning, this will never be sustainable. I won't be able to maintain it long term. But I knew that the only way to test out if something was sustainable was to give it a chance, which sounds weird because you're sort of forcing yourself into the sustainability by just doing it, but you have to because you don't really know what's sustainable ultimately until you give it time to become that routine or habit or you change the environment, you change the patterns. And so by setting this certain time in the evening, by having a specific pattern of like eating lunch, dog walk, doing work so that I know I shut off at this time and then go to the gym, like there's patterns I've now created where I don't even know if I like it any better, but it's just what I do. And it's now comfortable enough that I know I can keep doing it and I won't miss those sessions. But there's got to be the evolution in other things to make you want to do that, from embracing why you're doing it to placing more value on it to just even understanding that you got to test sometimes to see what does and doesn't work.
I love that because you just hit on something really important. You started with one habit, one thing in your routine that you wanted to value. And so it was shifting that workout. And then all of a sudden these other things had to be kind of evolve because that was highly valued. So we always say you start with one thing, you start with that 1% change. Things will start to evolve to make it so that pattern that you're creating is easier to follow. That routine becomes easier to follow because you're aligning yourself with it.
That alignment is important. And I think it's more than just trying to willpower your way through. Tell yourself you value this, tell yourself it's important, say, I like it. It's not just even the workout designed ahead of time, but it's all those other things in your life that need to fall into place. And mindset is a big one. You have to say sometimes, "Suck it up, buttercup, I'm testing this out," align my mindset with going all in on it and not giving myself any excuse not to do it. But out of that mindset then comes other habits where I have a thing of, I know at X time I'm exactly going. I know that I'm going to be wrapping up, so I can't start another project right then. I have the workout clothes already on, which for me isn't hard because I wear them all the time. But I have other little things in my routine where I don't take off my shoes when I come in the house after X time because I want to make sure that I go, right? And the more we shift that environment, the more we get in alignment from our mindsets to our actions to remind ourselves of the new habit we want to create.
Yeah, it's this snowball. The snowball's happening, and I'm gonna say this as well. You even said when you did that, it was hard at the beginning. That first month of you getting used to kind of a new routine, yeah, you may not hit it every single day, but the more you do, the more consistent you become with this, just like any other habit, the easier it becomes to kind of again, you're aligning yourself with it, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel as hard.
But it's also remembering why we're doing these things. No one is forcing me to do that. No one is forcing you to make a change for your goals. You are choosing to. You are doing this for you. And I think that prioritization of doing it for ourselves and that reminder is so key because it gives us choice in it versus feeling restricted, feeling like we have to, we should. It's creating that mindset of more, I get to do this because I feel I deserve this. And this is building the person I want to become with achieving my goals.
Yes. This is yours. This is your journey. This is what you are focusing on. So I always say too, like, as we're kind of talking, like things build. You start small. You do something for you first. And I think a big part of that, and you kind of touched on it, is even that mindset. How often do we not even recognize that we are kind of doing things for ourselves? But then when you kind of put a label on it, like, oh, I'm gonna own this, like this is my time, all of a sudden you feel like you've kind of had a little win for the day. Like, "Oh, I instead of doing this, I prioritize that, and this is for me, and that's my early win." If you can get yourself having, like, early wins in the day now, I'm I'm prefacing this, that's a win. I'm not saying, like, this is a giant habit where it's like, "Oh, first thing in the morning, you're going to go work out." It can be as simple as first thing in the morning, you you stave off, opening social media for a little while because you're gonna do something else at that time. That's an early win. If you can kind of do those things all of a sudden, that's another way to kind of build and be like, all right, like I'm doing this for me and now I'm gonna move on to this thing. But requires that recognition that you're doing it for yourself.
1 minute can really add up. And this seems silly, but it's shifted my mindset where when I make coffee in the morning, instead of going on my phone, I like do little loops around the kitchen and just sort of walk around. And I'm not trying to really even get steps. It's more just giving myself that mental space as the coffee is brewing, which takes like 2 seconds with the instant pods. But it's that little extra for me, right? Win, ticked it off, right? It's those small things that do build momentum. And you find when you start to do more, you kind of don't want to stop doing more. It's only once you're thrown out of that routine that all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to do more of nothing. So I think that's really important that we find ways to create that success through being able to check the boxes really quickly.
Yeah, again, just those small wins. As silly as it sounds, for me, I do a lesson on Duolingo before I allow myself to like open up social media. It's a small thing, but I feel like, oh, I did something productive before I'm going to go and see what's going on.
There's even been mornings where I've been trying to read a little bit more, doing a little bit more continuing education even, and I only have like 5 minutes, and to get myself to focus and not do anything else, I have to go on the treadmill as I do it. Not walking at a fast pace. This is not about activity, but it's about having that like restriction on what I can focus on. But there's been mornings where I'm like, I only have 5 minutes. I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it. I'll do it later. And I'm like, no, I'm still gonna do it, and often I actually do find a little bit more time, but even just that 5 minutes of, like, prioritizing me, even though it's, like, educational or this or that or other things that pay off, it's still like, "No, I took this time for myself," and it's a win because I know I also stayed consistent with it and overcame something hard. So there's such a snowball to some of these things beyond just the actual thing we're doing even.
Yeah, it's really like you said, like we've talked about, it's really like as you do it, it's like becomes easier to be like, oh, I'm going to do this now. When I do that, I find it easier for me to be like, "Oh, you know what? I should really read that chapter in this book now before I do that." And so we always feel like, "Oh, there's no time, there's no time." But oftentimes it's because we're not capitalizing on those small moments and having micro wins or micro self-care moments.
Yes, we're not using those little minutes to add up. So, with all this, like, I feel like we've given so many great tips on how to sort of start to build your routine, and we wanna keep it simple. So, going through the steps, and I want you to clarify anything, give me your thoughts, some closing thoughts on all these different things, but we wanna set the why, and we wanna understand why we're making these changes. We wanna understand we have to meet ourselves in the season that we're at right now. So it doesn't matter what used to work, what could work, what would work right now, and even assessing potentially a little bit what hasn't worked in the past to know what might not fit. And then starting with something that's for us, that meets us where we're at, that's so silly simple we could do it today. Thoughts on all of that, Michelle? Summary of how to start making like a routine that we really love that ultimately moves us forward towards our goals.
Yeah, that you've summed it up perfectly. The main thing I just want everyone to leave with is your goal isn't to grind your way to success. It's to build that routine that's going to support you long term. You start small with a core routine that you value, and then you layer in those habits.
Love it. Core routine. We can then change the exact implementation of that as our needs and goals change. But having those fundamentals in place is so essential. Michelle, thank you so much for jumping in and talking about how to build that routine that we really love because I think it's so key. Guys, would love to hear the habits that you are starting with and even what you've gone back to in your why to assess why your goals really matter to you.